Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a long day today.
Oh, no, it's
we'll go get the back here.
so far. The first house party was just really great energy, good questions. It's really, really exciting. Yeah.
We think this is the most Polk City Democrats have ever been together.
Really?
Just, you know, I'm
I
not
didn't
even
know
kidding.
there was
So.
Polk City Democrats. I thought I was the only one.
I love it. Well, you all made it possible. Literally, you created the space for people to come together. So thanks for letting us be part of it.
Absolutely.
We're excited. And we understood that Patty Judge
She is.
and Heather Matson.
Yes, she is.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Cool. So the political royalty are here as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, Petty served as on our board chair for work too. So
Oh, okay.
She's great. Yeah.
Right on.
Wonderful.
I'll let
Well,
you
thanks for having us. And
Yes.
introduce yourself.
excuse me. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary McAdams. I'm the chair of Enki Area Democrats.
Good to see
right
you.
down the street. We're flipping houses.
I was just gonna say
Yeah.
congratulations
Thank
on your
you.
successes. We got to be part of something similar in Texas.
Awesome. Yep,
A lot of
it's good
state
stuff.
house and U.S. House seats that we were
good.
able to flip. So
Good.
yeah,
Yep. It's just hard work.
it is right.
Nothing more than that.
And
Knocking doors.
you can never rest
No.
on your laurels, on the victories you have. You've got to sustain it and then build upon it. So
Yep.
congratulations
We're
on what
gonna
you've
be too
done.
blue to bother here pretty soon.
I love that.
And our rep is in there. So
This
Heather, flipped
Heather
the seat,
Matson. Yep.
After
Okay.
24 years.
Yeah.
So we'll do a quick picture maybe, and then I'll get out of the way. And this is Brenna.
Hello.
This is
Brenna, Beto.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
This is my daughter Piper. Who is
Piper.
the chair of Polk City Democrats, and she's the founder and the chair.
Oh, right on. Thank you for being here. Thanks again. And Piper. Hey, it's okay. I'm the same way early on a Saturday.
Here we go. Awesome. Piper, I see you. I see you back there.
Piper, is that a bird on Cynthia's head? What is that? Oh my gosh.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
And Joan is going to introduce you.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
Great. You got it. Get my Iowa Cubs cap. Somebody gave this to me at the last one. Hey, Beto, was that you on the tractor right now? We saw you cranking when we stopped last
He wanted to make sure to get here in time, but
I had a busy morning.
he's got a line aside. He's like, I got to get Beto on the tractor and get his picture. Math treasurer for Polk City then.
Oh, wonderful.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us out. And congrats on all the success that we're seeing here. People are turning out. Appreciate coming out. Grateful. Hey, Beto, I like that shirt. I'm a big Beatles fan. Is that your favorite record? Abbey Road, or do you have a...
I really like this record, yeah, but I have others.
We listen to White Album a lot, don't we?
So I just found on YouTube a version of Hello Goodbye that's just the piano and the drums. And Ringo's one of my favorite drummers, and you hear his genius on it. So I can send you all the link, or you can look it up. But it just, I thought I'd heard it all. You play drums?
She's a percussionist.
Get out. So can we grab your cell, and we'll send you the link, and you're gonna love this. He does so much with so little, and for me it really made that song to be able to hear it stripped down like that. So if you'll shoot Cynthia a note, I'll send you the link on there. Great. All right,
Thanks so
go
much.
drummers of the world. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Our friend
Appreciate it.
Michaela.
Michaela, glad that you're here. Right on. Well, here we go. We're gonna get
Here we
started.
go.
Yeah. Hi again.
See you guys. I'll be seeing you.
Right on. Okay. It may be too early, but maybe it's never too early. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. Yes.
All right, should we go to listen?
You want to do it, Teddy? Should we do it? Fine. Thank you for having us out. I really appreciate it. All right. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Hey, good to see you again. Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you too.
Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here at the house. We thought there was going to be only about 20 people, but I guess we have a few more than 20 people. Steve and I are excited to have Beto with us today. We, in our family, look forward to caucus season like some families look forward to holiday season. We love to caucus. We love living here in Iowa because you get to meet everyone up close and personal. One of the exciting things was that Beto's campaign is all about change and about believing in the people and starting out at the grassroots. So that's why we were excited to have him in our house and to be able to talk and take questions from each and every one of you. Well, maybe not each and every one. When it was going to be 20 people, it was going to be each and every one of you. Please join us in welcoming Beto O'Rourke.
Good morning. Little volume on that. Y buenos dias. Thank you all for joining us, for welcoming us from far West Texas, from the Mountain Time Zone. Joan and Steve into your house with this community, and for all of the energy that everyone is bringing to this moment, a moment that will define us forever after, because there's never been a set of challenges and the flip side of those challenges, a set of opportunities like the ones that are before us now. And what I feel everywhere that I go, in every room like this, in every single part of the country, is that we are up for this moment. We are happy to be defined by this test, that we're going to come together regardless of the differences or divisions between us for this country that we love so much. We know that everything that we care about is on the line, unlike any other time in our lifetimes. Whether it's healthcare, folks who are being consumed by diabetes or curable cancers, or the flu in the year 2019 in the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet, not because we don't have the resources or the medical technology, it's because we have yet to form the political will to do the right thing for guaranteed high-quality universal health care for every child, every woman, every man in this country. But I know that we can. Too many millions living in the shadows of a country whose success they are helping to build in some of the most back-breaking work that man or woman has yet devised. So many of them without status or citizenship, yet already contributing so much to our communities. More than 1 million dreamers who live under a perpetual fear of deportation back to a country that for all intents and purposes they don't know, whose language they do not speak, where they no longer have family or connections upon which they can rely. And even if they are successful against those long odds after deportation, they will be successful for that place, not this place, not our country. If we are going to free every dreamer from any fear of being deported back by making them U.S. citizens here so that they can contribute to their full potential, it cannot be done by half the country or only one party or big cities versus rural communities. All of us must see our shared interest and the common cause in doing the right thing while we still can. An economy that is working too well for too few and not at all for too many. It's not just the school teachers and educators I meet who are working 2 and 3 jobs, though they have the most important job before them. That child whose lifelong love of learning must be unlocked for her to realize her potential, and by extension, our potential. I want every American who's working 40 hours, who's contributing to their communities, their families, this country's success, to only have that one job. It should be enough. It should pay a living wage. They should be able to take care of themselves, their kids, their parents with paid family leave in every single part of this country. And women who earn a fraction of what men make throughout this country. And I think Iowa ranks 35th in the disparity between men and women working the same jobs, providing the same value, but receiving unequal pay. They must be paid the same as every single man in every single job. And in this country, your sexual orientation, your race, your ethnicity, to whom it is that you pray, how many generations that you've lived here, or whether you just got here last week, cannot be used as discrimination to keep you out of a job, or to fire you, or to prevent you from being successful going forward. We've got to bring everybody in to this economy. And then those challenges that the very youngest in this room will better understand than we do, because the consequences of our action or inaction will define their futures. The Missouri River Basin saw a runoff 4 times the average rate this year, the greatest runoff levels since we have been keeping records on the Missouri River. Houston, Texas saw 58 inches of rain drop out of the sky in one storm in 2017. And that was the third 500-year flood in just 5 years in Southeast Texas. In the Panhandle, where we grow the fiber that clothes not just America, but so much of the rest of the world, those cotton growers are persisting through droughts that in some cases have lasted 5 years long, that undermine our ability to grow what sustains us and keeps us independent and providing for the rest of the world. The fires, the natural disasters, the floods, the consumption not just of our private property, but the lives of our fellow Americans and people all over this planet is in part due to our own emissions, our own excesses, and our own inaction in the face of science 300 years after the Enlightenment. Thank you, every one of you who marched for science. It's crazy that you have to. But when you have a president who says that wind turbines cause cancer, who has removed the United States, the one country on the face of the planet to do so, from the Paris climate agreements, which in and of themselves were going to be insufficient to meeting the challenge before us, but he has set us backwards, has taken the indispensable country, forged in sacrifice and service, that has met every existential threat before us, whether it was Nazi Germany in the 1940s, which threatened the existence of Western democracies. This country, those service members, their sacrifice not only made this country, but the world safe for democracy in the following 75 years. We are the inheritors of their sacrifice, their service, and their example. And who are we to squander it at this defining moment of truth? Those same scientists say we have 10 years left to us to get it right, to prevent this planet from warming yet another degree Celsius, after which you will not be able to live near the Missouri River or in Houston, Texas, or maybe my hometown of El Paso, because it will no longer sustain human life. If 400,000 apprehensions on our southern border is a problem, wait until some countries in the Western Hemisphere can no longer sustain human life, because that is the trajectory that we are on today. If we're going to free ourselves from a reliance and a dependence on fossil fuels, we're going to invest in renewable energy and the jobs that come with it in a country where the 2 fastest growing jobs are wind and solar. It's going to take every single one of us seeing ourselves in one another, and especially in those kids who are going to succeed us in these same places and positions of trust that we all hold as voters or as representatives. I want to make sure that not just in this campaign, but in our leadership, we seek to bind this deeply divided and highly polarized country back together. It is absolutely the only shot we have of meeting any of these challenges, especially the most serious ones. From my experience in Congress, 6 years, every single day of it in the minority, the only way that I could come back to a meeting like this one and face my constituents eyeball to eyeball at town halls that we held every single month without fail, all comers welcome, no holds barred. You could come if you loved me, and my mom often did. You could come if you were disappointed in me, or had a question or an idea or suggestion that you wanted to propose. If I came back and said, I'm sorry, I'm unable to deliver because of the composition of the Congress in which I serve, or the man who sits in the White House, my community would have called BS on that and thrown me out of office, as they should have. But instead, fearing their judgment, acknowledging that I served at their pleasure, that I was accountable to them, I found those Republican colleagues to make sure that in El Paso, we were able to turn around a VA that was letting down veterans who came back from Vietnam 50 years ago, from Afghanistan last night, with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, those signature wounds and conditions following combat and service and sacrifice to this country. They were waiting in lines in El Paso longer than in any other part of the country. Not days, not weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, all too often giving up, connected to the record number of veterans taking their lives. 16 of the 20 a day who lose their lives by their own hand were unable or unwilling to get into the VA. Now, we work together as a community, Republicans and Democrats, private sector and public sector alike, to turn that around. From 68 full-time providers and mental health care specialists and staff at the VA to nearly 120 today, because we focused on it, made it a priority, and did not allow our differences to get in the way. But at a meeting like this, someone stood up and they said, "You may not know this, Beto, but those coming back from service with an other than honorable discharge are by law precluded from even setting foot in the VA or getting in one of those long lines that you just talked about. And their rate of suicide is twice as high as the general veterans population." So we wrote a bill, the Honor Our Commitment Act, a great bill, if you ask me, that would ensure that those veterans could get in and at least get mental health care help. Be there in front of a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist or a social worker who literally might be able to save their lives. But that bill in a Republican-controlled Congress was going nowhere. And so we found that Republican colleague who loves veterans just as much as I do, despite our party differences and our differences in geography, had a little bit of a different idea about how to get to the same goal. We each listened to one another. We compromised, found some consensus legislation, introduced it together, prevailed upon our colleagues. We said, yes, it's going to be more expensive to take care of more veterans than we're seeing today. But shouldn't we be willing to pay any price and bear any burden for those who put their lives on the line for this country? And we're literally willing to lose them for us. And yes, there should be a consequence for the status of your discharge. But that consequence cannot be paid in your life, which is functionally what is happening today. Our colleagues listened to us, and Republicans and Democrats alike voted for the proposal on the floor of the House, and it passed 435-0. Passed the Senate as well, after we worked on the relationships we had and formed new ones where we did not have them, and was signed into law by someone with whom I agree on almost nothing, Donald Trump. And yet we found enough common ground to do the common good for those who had served this country before. It's the way that I've served in Congress. It's the way that I campaigned in every one of the 254 counties of Texas, including Archer County, reliably red, so red that Democrats previously feared to tread, so they didn't show up. And Republicans, with no natural competitor, didn't have to campaign or hold town hall meetings like these. And so functionally, the people of Archer County were not represented. They were not heard. They did not have a seat at the table. But we showed up in Archer County, had a town hall at Mern's Cafe with about 12 or 13 people, 20 if you include those who were innocently eating breakfast when we walked in and had our town hall. Before I can walk in, a gentleman stops me, and he has a manila envelope, out of which he pulls a black and white photo. And he said, "This is a picture of my dad and some other people talking to Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1948. He had dropped out of the sky in a helicopter, landed on the courthouse grounds, walked over to the American Legion Hall, and listened to those whom he hoped to serve and represent in the Senate before asking for their vote." And this guy says, "My dad lived here his entire life. I've lived here my entire life. You are the first Senate candidate from either party to show up since 1948, 70 years. Now, I don't know how many more votes we got in Archer County. Obviously not enough. But I wanted the people of Archer County to know that we were listening to them. We're going to fight for them, and we will serve them. And that's the way that we're campaigning across the country now. Everyone is important. Everyone counts. Everyone matters. No me importa who you voted for last time, or even who you're going to vote for next time. Before anything else, we will define ourselves by the fact that we are Americans, and we have the opportunity to do the right thing for this country at the moment that it counts. That's why I'm running to serve you as the next President of the United States of America. Thank you for having us out here today. Very, very grateful. Looking forward to answering your questions. Cynthia Cano from my team has a microphone. If you raise your hand, We'll try to get as many voices and people into the conversation as possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ethan Crane, and I'm an ACLU Rights for All voter. I saw what you set up with Denison about the racial injustice inherent in our criminal justice system. We know that our country imprisons people at a higher rate than any other country in the world and does so disproportionately to people of color. Should you become president, would you commit in your first term to reducing incarceration rates by 50%? And if yes, how would you do it?
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for being here and for asking the question and raising an incredibly important issue. That we have the largest prison population on the face of the planet per capita, bar none. So many serving time for nonviolent drug crimes, including possession of marijuana, at a time that it's very clear to all of us that this country is only moving in one direction, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, when it comes to criminalizing possession of that substance. And though Americans of all races and walks of life and ethnicities use marijuana at the same rate, only some are more likely than others to be arrested for it. Those are people of color, to do time, and upon release to be forced to check a box on every employment application form, saying that they have a conviction, making it less likely that they're going to get that job. They're now prevented from federally subsidized student loans to improve themselves through higher education. Their future has been narrowed. Their choices have been limited. The answer to this is not only to end the federal prohibition on marijuana, which will relieve the pressure on that prison system, not only to expunge the arrest records of those caught in possession of something that's legal in so much of the rest of the country, we must also end a for-profit prison system in this country that has prison corporations lobbying members of Congress for mandatory minimums and throwing a book at them, sentencing for possession of things like marijuana. We've got to make sure that we end a cash bail system that keeps people in prison for being too poor to post bail. We've got to end a war on drugs that is a war on people. But look, this is the much tougher thing that we need to do, and therefore the more important thing that we need to do. We've got to acknowledge the truth and the real story, the consequences and the legacy of slavery, of segregation, of Jim Crow, of continuing suppression. That some people, based on the color of their skin, have, for all intents and purposes, been criminalized in this country since the end of slavery. To profoundly devastating effects. And it's not just the prison population, although that should be bad enough. It's the fact that in white America, there's 10 times the wealth today that there is in black America. It's the fact that when you look at discrepancies in infant mortality rates in the country, they're greater now between white America and black America than they were in 1850, 15 years before the end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery in the United States of America. We're in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. So if we pretend that this is simply an issue of criminal justice, as important as that dynamic of this problem is, then we will fail to see the forest for the trees before us. We have systemic, foundational challenges in our country. For some, Texas was 50th in voter turnout, I mentioned earlier, because people were drawn out of their democracy based on their race. We still have voter ID laws that allow you to use your permit to carry a firearm to prove who you are in Texas at the ballot box. You cannot use your student ID at the University of Texas at Austin to prove who you are at the ballot box in Texas. So we have a lot of work to do if we're going to begin the repair that is necessary to ensure that we do not visit the same injustices on every generation that follows ours right now. But you've given us a good place to start, which is the criminal justice system. Those are some specific proposals that I would like to implement to meet that challenge. Thank you for the question.
We're going to tag team this one, so.
Awesome.
Start. Say my name is Layla.
I'll just read it. My name is Layla and I am 5. It makes me sad that some kids don't have enough to eat. If you are president, how will you make sure that all kids have food?
Yeah. Thank you, Layla, and thank you for caring about other kids. You're going to make sure that they get the help they need, the food that they deserve, because you stood up and you asked a great question for them. I mentioned school teachers and educators earlier. What strikes me in their service is not only do they answer that call to help educate the next generation, despite the fact that they're working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. Not only do they have to envision the possibility that an active shooter is going to come into that classroom and take those kids for whom they've sacrificed so much already. If your kids are like mine, they've gone through active shooter drills in their public schools as young as 1st grade, which is what Henry did at Mesita Elementary. I didn't do that when I was a kid at Mesita Elementary. Those teachers are also out of their own pocket, though they don't make enough to make ends meet in their own home, paying for decorations in the classroom, supplies for the kid who forgot them at home, but also clothes for the kid who shows up in the same jeans and t-shirt every day. She knows his ability to learn is connected to his own sense of self-worth and dignity, and so she's going to help him get ahead. And then that child who's on the free and reduced breakfast and lunch program, but has no meal waiting for her when she goes home. Can I tell you how many teachers I've met who told me that they have paid for those meals so that that kid gets the calories in her system so that she can burn them the next day in the classroom, learning what that teacher has to share. No child, no human being in this country, given the fact that we grow all of our own food and the world's food here in Iowa and in Texas and throughout this country, should go without. And yet so many, too many do today. And you have an administration right now that is trying to take what assistance we provide away from those who have it, the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program. They are trying to cut that program right now and take it away from other families. Not only must we strengthen that, but we must add to it. I want you focused on learning in that classroom, working that job, raising your family, writing that next amazing poem that is going to blow our minds and improve our lives. But if you're too hungry or too ill or too insecure to be able to do that, we're not going to benefit from the genius that you are willing to share over the course of your life if only you had that opportunity. So you've got my commitment for those kids that you care so much about. And I think you have everyone's commitment in the room. Great question. Thank you.
Hello, Congressman. My name's Mandy. Thank you so much for coming to Iowa. I'm 28 years old, a member of the millennial generation, the first generation that's not expected to outperform our parents economically. What are your plans for addressing the student debt crisis that prevents us from reaching our economic potential?
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. Small anecdote to begin the answer. I was able to go to college, had student loans, a work-study job every semester I was there, and my parents on their own took out personal loans to help me pay for my education. And I just remember the look on my dad's face when I came home my junior year of college and I told him I was going to be an English major. And he's thinking, you're taking out these loans, you're working these jobs, we're taking out loans so that you can read books. Why don't you want to become an accountant or an engineer or a doctor or something with value? You're right. The cost of higher education, and not just tuition, importantly. Let's take into account books and the room that we need to live in and the food that we need to sustain ourselves is out of reach for so many of our fellow Americans. And really functionally, even for those who are able to attend higher education, on average, they are graduating with $40,000 on their back. And it is a weight that literally sinks them into the ground. 10% default rate on the 1.5 trillion with a T, trillion with a T, dollars in outstanding debt right now. It is the one debt that you will never escape until you have paid it off or until you're in the grave. I've met people at the very end of their lives, a daughter of a woman in hospice care, whose mom is still paying off her student loan debt today. So a couple of thoughts about how to get out of this problem that we ourselves have created. One, stop digging the hole. So if you want to attend a community college, let's make sure that you're able to do that for free. Even better, if we can invest in early college, high school, so you graduate with a diploma and an associate's degree, ready to earn a living wage on day one at 18 or 19 years old. Let's connect with unions. Those apprenticeships provide a pathway to learning a trade or a skill or a discipline that not only provides purpose and function for yourself in your life, but also allows you to command that paycheck that can sustain you for the rest of your life. Because unions provide lifetime learning for their Americans, and the benefits accrue to all of us, whether you're in a union or not. That's the way they've always worked, and yet inexplicably in this country, over the last 30 years, we've diminished, weakened the power of unions instead of strengthening them. And then, if you want to attend a public-serving, publicly financed four-year university, let's ensure that you do that without taking on any debt. Because again, the benefit accrues to our advantage. If you're going to teach school, I want you to be able to get in front of those kids, and I don't want you to be saddled with all of that debt, which might prevent you from doing it in the first place, given all those other challenges that we described. Now, if you are one of those who is paying back those loans and cannot afford to do so, I want to re-up the public service student debt forgiveness program. So 45,000 jobs at the VA that are unfilled today. That's nuts. Those lines that I talked about, people waiting to see a mental health care provider or a primary care provider that stretch weeks, months, years. If you're willing to come to a VA in an in-demand profession, in an underserved community, I want to wipe clean your debt altogether. If you're willing to teach school or be in a support role in a community that needs your talent and human capital, I want to wipe clean your student loan debt. At a minimum, I want to refinance what you already have at a much lower rate, again, to all of our benefit, to ensure that you do not default and that you're able to achieve your true potential over the course of your life. So 2 things we can do: make it less expensive going in, and for those saddled with the debt, refinance or wipe it clean for public service. Thank you for the question. There you go.
Hi, thanks, Congressman. I'm Joanne Tully, and what I'm hearing here is all the problems that are near and dear to our hearts. We've got education, we've got feeding our kids, feeding everybody, we've got the prison system, climate change, you name it, education. In my mind, though, we're all on board with what needs to be done, but this whole, over the past 30 to 40 years, profits over people.
Yeah.
So the corporations that have changed laws, have stacked the courts. What can you speak to? I mean, to me, you solve that issue, it solves everything else. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Thank you. I've been thinking about this a lot. How did we get to where we are right now? If we are the wealthiest and most powerful country, ingenious, distinguished by our service and sacrifice, there's so many instances that we can recount in our lives or in this country's history. How did we come to such deep divisions and inequality? And why are we doing this to one another right now? And I think part of our genius as a country is that we anticipated human nature, which is if you have power, you want to continue to hold on to that power and accumulate even more power. I mean, that's the story of human civilization. Power feeds on the powerless or maintains its purchase on power at the expense of those who have none of it. And very often uses division and fear to keep us apart based on our differences of race or gender or religion or sexual orientation or whatever. Keeps us afraid of one another, afraid of immigrants. Watch out for those Mexicans, they're rapists and criminals. Then candidate Donald Trump told us. Or we're going to ban all Muslim travel to the United States of America. When has a Western country said they want to exclude all people of one religion from their country? Or Klansmen and Nazis, very fine people. Don't you worry about it. The policies and practices that follow. Hate crimes up every one of the last 3 years. Kids in cages at our border at their most desperate and vulnerable moment. Their moms deported back 2,000 miles from the very country from which they fled. Historic income and wealth inequality, exacerbated by divisions in race that are systemic and foundational. That's the way that they do this. What is our answer? It's a vigorous democracy, both political and economic. And that's what our founders envisioned. But when the very safeguards of our democracy are being manipulated before our eyes right now, when members of Congress are choosing their own voters, and they do, when the Supreme Court, to your point, declares that corporations are people and money is speech, and they can spend unlimited amounts of money capturing our institutions, and buying the outcomes of legislation and elections. It invites our cynicism, our distrust, and the disengagement of millions of Americans who've just dropped out of the political process or have no intent in participating going forward. And it gives the lie to this idea that we're all created equal, or that we're founded on the premise that we're all created equal to equal opportunity, because so many experience such gross differences in opportunity and outcomes in this country. So restoring our democracy, a new Voting Rights Act, so it's one person, one vote, no matter where you live in this country, same day, an automatic voter registration, ending gerrymandering, getting big money out of our politics by setting the example in a race that takes no PAC money or lobbyist help or corporate contributions, but also, if we need to, amending our foundational document, the Constitution, to make that explicitly clear that it's people, not corporations, and that the power has to reside with human beings in a democracy if we're going to have any chance to make it. And then a question that came up earlier about economic opportunity. If you cannot see yourself in the future of this country, or a future for your kids in this country, then this country will have no future as a democracy. There's so many things that Madison or Jefferson or others wrote that said, if we return to princes and princesses and dukes and fiefdoms, this country cannot hold. We're going to turn into something else, perhaps an aristocracy, which in some ways, functionally, in some parts of the country or in some parts of our economy, we are today. So that full, vigorous political and economic democracy is the answer to the unprecedented concentration that you just described. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
To your left, I have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
I have a sexy accent, so I'm going to ask you in Spanish and English.
Okay.
Señor Beto, yo entiendo que todo lo que está hablando es casi imposible resolver en solo un término presidencial.
Sí.
Pero me pongo a pensar si tiene usted un plan que pueda durar 500 años y que por lo menos haga un solo cambio que dure 500 años. Mr. Beto, I understand that every single thing that you're talking about is very difficult to change. It's impossible to change that in one presidential term. But I was wondering if you have a plan that at least change one thing that could last 500 years or 500 years.
Yeah.
Something that definitely changed the course that our country is going to. The communities are being divided. Our beloved community is turning apart. It breaks my heart. I'm not original from the United States. I am a citizen and a voter. But it breaks my heart to see people tearing apart each other. I'm tired of seeing that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I love those people that is on my side, in my back, in front of me. And I would like one day to see all of us to unify again.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you for the question. Empiezo en español y luego en inglés. Los retos que queremos enfrentar del cambio climático, de la reforma migratoria, del cuidado de salud por todos en cada parte de este país, en cada estado. Vamos a tener éxito si tenemos una democracia en que podemos contar en cada voto, podemos escuchar cada voz, pero al mismo tiempo necesitamos una economía en que cada persona puede participar y tener prospecto de éxito independiente de su género, de su raza, de las cuantas generaciones que tienen adentro o afuera de los Estados Unidos. Y yo sé que podemos como presidente, pero mejor como país, cambiar por el mejor estos temas en frente de nosotros. El tema más importante, el cambio climático, necesitamos reunir o unir este país en una manera bipartidista, republicanos y demócratas, en las comunidades rurales y también en las ciudades, juntos como un país. Yo quiero hacer eso y estoy en esta campaña en esa manera. Cuando serví en el Congreso, serví en esa manera. Pero no hay ninguna persona que puede hacer este trabajo tan importante solo. Necesitamos, merecemos todos en este esfuerzo. If we're really going to meet these challenges, I agree with the premise of your question. This country is going to have to reunite or unite in some cases in the first place. The differences cannot define us of party or geography or of anything else. And you ask, what is that change that we need to sustain for 50 years? I think Churchill said something to the effect, the politician looks at the next election, the statesman or stateswoman looks at the next generation. Maybe we're looking at the next 50 generations, down 500 years. If we can confront climate, we must confront climate change before it is too late. We will prevent our children, our grandchildren, their children and grandchildren from a hell that is all too predictable right now. And it is definitely the judgment of our children, of Ulysses and Molly and Henry, in my case, that I fear, that compels me to be here with you in Iowa, instead of at Henry's basketball game or Ulysses' baseball game or driving Molly over to the birthday party. Amy's doing all that right now. All of us are serving and sacrificing and standing up to be counted at this defining moment. But let us not define ourselves apart from others. And I love the way that you said it. Behind me, before me, beside me, I'm with you. We're with each other. And we've got to live that. We've got to speak that way. We've got to resist the temptation to descend into denigrating and demeaning our fellow Americans. There's one person in particular who makes that so tempting. But let's not take the bait, right? We're better than that. We're not a fearful people. We're a courageous, bold, aspirational, ambitious people. Allow us to be distinguished by those characteristics. Thank you for the question.
This is going to be our last question on the church. Hi, my name is Morgan, and so recently I've been doing a project in school where I've been learning about clean water access and how so many people don't have clean water. And I learned that number is roughly 740 million people around the world who don't have clean water access. So some of those people are in our country right now, and places a whole bunch. So in our country right now, and those places are Flint, Michigan, mostly. So, what do you think we should do so kids like me have clean water access in the future?
Yeah. Thank you, Morgan, for being here. I share both your concern and your love of the Beatles. We talked about this a little bit. When I was campaigning across Texas, something that surprised me is that there are nearly 50 water systems in our big, bold, beautiful state of 28 million where the water is not safe to drink. So this is a problem we see all over the country. And it has something to do with the way that we extract resources out of the ground, the way that we treat our soil, the fact that we have an administration where the leaders of the EPA and the Interior Department do not believe in the functions that they oversee, and prioritize corporations and those who want to extract over people who will eat what grows out of the soil, drink what flows through their community, breathe what is in the air. And when we talk about pollution and climate change, we should also acknowledge, you mentioned Flint, Michigan, there are some communities who have borne the brunt of the climate change that we have already seen, of the pollution that we are already emitting, more than others, who have rates of MS or cancer or asthma that are far greater than in other parts of the country. So you're so right to bring this up, because it's literally a life and death issue for our fellow Americans and our fellow human beings on this planet. So one, let's not diminish and weaken the standing of the EPA, the resources that they have, their regulatory oversight of industry. Let's strengthen that. And then as we transition into a renewable fuel-based economy, let's also prioritize those who previously have been left behind or who were forced to take the worst of our excesses or our inaction. And you mentioned Flint, Michigan, many communities in Texas that I'm thinking about as well. There are probably some in Iowa that we should be lifting up at the same time. I mentioned the two fastest growing jobs in America today are wind and solar jobs. Let's make sure everyone has a chance to compete for those jobs. and have that high wage, high skill, high value profession that allows them to have some dignity in their lives and to do their part. Farming in Iowa, we understand that there's a strong incentive to cultivate that land for corn. And I'm grateful and proud of what Iowa has done to relieve us at least of 10% of our dependence on oil and gas, now that we have a 10% blend mandate through the renewable fuel standards. But we can also do something in the Farm Bill that helps those farmers make a profit by not cultivating some of their land and allowing what would naturally grow on there to grow, to capture more of the carbon out of the air, which also improves our water systems, our streams, our rivers, and our aquifers. So I want to make sure to go back to this larger theme that we've been talking about today, that we invest in people and communities, in their health, their ability to grow to be their best and give back to their highest potential, not in corporations, not in industry, not in those who already have power. So your generation and the generations that follow are the ones that are on our mind today. Thank you, Morgan, for being here and for the questions. Is that it, Nicole? Thank you all so much for having us over today, for welcoming us. Congratulations on all the many successes. I heard that Heather Matson was going to be. Heather, congratulations on your victory. What you all are doing with organizing right now in this part of Iowa is absolutely inspiring. We're really grateful for what you and all who worked with you to make that possible have been doing. We will be back sooner rather than later. Look forward to continuing to answer your questions, and we'll see you all down the road. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You come with me, man. We're gonna get a photo.